In my last video, I talked at some length about a show called Breakfast Time. If you haven't watched that video, I recommend that you check it out first because it's really worth the deep dive into just how innovative and exciting and spontaneous that show was. But to briefly summarize, it was a morning show that was co-hosted by Tom Bergeron and Laurie Hibberd, with support from an announcer named Jim Cocott and a puppet named Bob. The show was carried live from a 6,500 square foot apartment in New York's Flatiron District, and it was built on the idea of taking full advantage of live TV, where anything can happen and there's no such thing as off-camera. The result was a show brimming with energy and originality, which won at the hearts of critics and viewers alike, who fell in love with the idea that morning television could look like something other than The Today Show or Good Morning America, and genuinely be a vehicle for fun, not just something you blankly stare at while you're waiting for your morning coffee to kick in. So, naturally, the question arises, if the show really was this great, what happened? Why didn't it last? Well, the short version of the story is that Breakfast Time was the victim of one of the most botched transitions in the history of television, in which an effort to bring the show to the masses torpedoed it from the peak of its glory to non-existence in the span of less than 2 years. But you're not interested in the short version, you're on my channel, you want the details, and you're in luck, because I've got just the people to supply them.
Good start.
Well, the lighting's terrible in this room.
So, a little backstory. A few hours after I uploaded the Breakfast Time video, it landed in Tom Bergeron's hands, and lucky for me, he really enjoyed it and felt compelled not only to leave a comment, which already comfortably made for an above-average Tuesday, but also to share the video on his social profiles. Soon after, Laurie saw the video and left another nice comment. So, seeing as the video was being well received, and I already had part 2 in the pipeline, I invited Tom and Laurie both to a Zoom interview, and to my delight, they both agreed. Laurie actually joined from her hotel room in Turkey, where she was vacationing at the time.
Just please tell everybody I was in Turkey in bad lighting.
Yeah.
So with that established, let's get into it. This is the rest of the story of Breakfast Time. As I detailed in Part 1, FX launched in 1994 as an experimental embrace of live television. Breakfast Time was live, of course, but so were the other 5 original shows in FX's lineup. These were all broadcast from that FX apartment, too, which made the shows feel interconnected in a way. It was a concept unlike anything else on American television, and FX gave the concept an admirable shot. But by the end of 1995, with the network having been on for a year and a half, the cracks were starting to show. A couple of the shows were doing well, but nothing was taking off, and some of the less popular shows were already beginning to meet their ends. All signs would seem to indicate that the executives at Fox were losing faith in this whole live TV concept. But Breakfast Time was the exception, and it's easy to understand why people loved it. In its 20 months on the air, it had developed an identity as the most insane way to start your day. It had this great dynamic production style, this vibrant energy, and a rockstar cast of studio personalities and road warriors.
And what you touched on, Connor, which I guess I must have realized on some level, but you pointed it out vividly, was everything in terms of the graphics and the way they appeared on the screen. Everything was part of this cohesive sensibility that Breakfast Time had. And it was almost like a psychic link amongst all of us, that on our best mornings, it was a pure passing game. It really was.
We used to call, Jim, Al, Tom, and I used to call ourselves 4 legs of a chair, because it took all 4 of us to make the magic happen. And if you even took one of the legs away, if anybody went on vacation, we were just all kind of a little off until we were all back together. You know, the Road Warriors had their own special kind of magic. They dove in with everything they could. And as well, you know, I always think about when we were having fun doing the Friday strut in the apartment, they would get 4 people in an office at 5 o'clock in the morning on the West Coast and have them dancing around. They couldn't probably even hear the music, but they're like, okay, everybody dance around, and everybody would. They had some mayor of some city, you know, dancing around with the proclamation that it was Bob the Puppet Day or something like that. I mean, it was just crazy, the participation and the ingenuity of Phil was the best, I have to say. You could give him nothing and he would make segments out of it. He was so clever.
The whole show was genuinely revolutionary. It's just that the revolution was happening on the FX channel. It was a home that ensured creative freedom, but also guaranteed a smaller audience. If the revolution was going to be brought to the masses, Breakfast Time was going to need a new network. Enter Fox, FX's parent, a TV network that was preparing to celebrate its 10th birthday, and what a decade it had had. Through a string of breakout hits, huge dollar programming deals, and perhaps a bit of luck, Fox had defied expectations and taken itself from upstart venture to major network, a move so impressive and successful that 2 other major media companies were now attempting to replicate it. But unlike the other 3 networks, Fox had never attempted to program anything in daytime or the morning. This breakfast time thing was doing pretty well on cable though, and its unconventional style was a perfect fit with Fox's unconventional brand. Maybe this could be the show that would bring Fox into the morning. So with the writing on the wall for the FX channel, meetings were held and arrangements were made in 1995 to move breakfast time to Fox. It was a venture full of promise, one being championed by the president of 20th Television.
The executive at Fox who engineered the green light to move a version of the show to Fox, who really loved breakfast time, it was Greg Meidel. It was great to have the head of a studio as your guiding light, except that in the interim, he went to Paramount.
Tom was slightly mistaken. Greg Meidel actually moved to MCA, but the fact remains that his departure meant that this project was losing perhaps its most valuable supporter. And in his place,
there was another executive, and he wasn't crazy about the show that much. So,
is that what happened? I don't think I ever knew that.
Rick Jacobson. Yeah. It was a whole different thing.
This regime change is arguably the catalyst for a lot of the decisions we'll see as this story continues. So, just file that away in your brain for a minute, because it's not important just yet. What is important is that the new show is definitely going to happen.
At that point, you think, okay, well, FX is kind of a farm team and Fox is the majors, if you use a baseball analogy. So, hey, this will be great. We can do this on the network.
It would seem that some details about the new show were decided fairly early. The show would be reduced to an hour in length with an intended start time of 9 a.m. Eastern. 9 a.m. So that actually means we're not going to be competing with the network morning shows. What's up with that?
Well, Fox affiliates had their own morning shows. They had their own news shows like Good Day LA, things like that, whatever. So we couldn't co-opt that time period. So the logical place would be right after the affiliates' news shows.
Yeah, as it turned out, a lot of Fox stations already distinguished themselves from the national network morning shows by offering their own local morning shows. And those that didn't tended to have the time locked up in Fox's children's programming. So the 7 to 9 a.m. slot that Breakfast Time aired in for most of its original run on cable was a no-touching zone for most Fox stations. Hence, a 9 a.m. start time. And given the later start time, the show would be more appropriately christened Fox After Breakfast. So wait a second, if Fox After Breakfast wasn't going to air opposite Good Morning America and the Today Show, what was it going to be competing against? Well, the 9 o'clock hour has traditionally belonged to these stations, who in theory can put on whatever they want, but in practice tended to put on the same handful of shows in most markets. And the one to know is Live with Regis and Kathy Lee. The show had been on nationally for about 8 years by 1996 and aired almost universally at 9 a.m. on most ABC stations. It was a popular show and already a part of American TV culture. It's Regis. Everyone loves Regis. Admittedly, this 9 a.m. thing isn't great. The breakfast time pitch was strongest as a direct counter to the seriousness of the network morning shows. The show itself is clearly modeled in that way, with all the remote segments and special interest pieces being similar in substance to the network morning shows, but it was all presented in this high-octane environment that could not have been more different. Putting it on at 9 o'clock would remove it from that context. Plus, you're dealing with a different audience with different expectations. As trivial as it may seem, time slots really can make or break a show. But at least the change had a good reason. There probably wasn't another practical way for Fox to get a morning show on and cleared by their stations, so even if it's not the most ideal arrangement, it's an easy one to justify given the circumstances. And besides, it wouldn't really have any impact on the show's actual content. Surely they wouldn't make any changes to the show's format or its hosts or anything ridiculous like that. So with the plan for Fox After Breakfast in place, all of the announcements got made. Breakfast Time's final episode would air on March 1st, 1996, and Fox After Breakfast was given a launch window of late summer that same year. Breakfast Time's final 2 shows were extravagant. The show's final episode, about 7 minutes of which are available online, appears to be a grand send-off, during which a time capsule of Breakfast Time memorabilia is filled and buried in Madison Square Park, where, for all I know, it might still reside today.
Here's the timepiece that Jim gave us the time every single day, along with the USA Today, which covered up that beautiful face. We've wound that clock up. It's guaranteed to last 500 years.
Yeah.
And the prior day's episode might actually be even more interesting and fitting as a finale. On February 29th, 1996, the day's episode of Breakfast Time was devoted to 2 viewers who decided to get married on the show.
And this all came about because of a tie, didn't it?
Whoa, the tie. Tom Bergeron.
You believe it?
Wow.
Matthew faxed us saying I wear the same tie as Tom. And then all of a sudden they're getting married on the show. I don't know how that happened.
And the whole episode is devoted to this bizarre breakfast time themed wedding.
I'm doing cool.
You're informal, Phil.
No, I'm dancing at Chippendales later.
Well, not at Chippendales.
Want to see where to tuck the money?
Jim the announcer's own Aunt Mary Gordon, who made the wedding cake.
Oh, wow.
With the bride, the groom, and the little Bob on it. Now, you said a lot of love went into this.
A lot of love went into it.
What else besides love?
Carrot cake, chocolate cake.
There's a lot of love. Clearly no blueprint, but there's a lot of love. Also, longtime organist for the New York Yankees, Eddie Layton is our wedding organist. Now, Eddie, I know you know how to play for the Yankees. Do you know how to play for a wedding?
You know, I actually wrote the wedding march.
Did you really?
I really wrote the wedding march.
Give us a touch of that.
Here it is. Oh, no, that's not it.
Sprinkled throughout the episode are 2 Road Warrior segments, one of which having Gillian Hamilton interview flute makers, and one in which Phil Kogan takes an inventive approach to the whole Road Warrior format.
Now, Phil Kogan, Road Warrior, was originally scheduled to go to Paradise Cove in Cozumel, but we blew all the money on the wedding, is what happened.
Yeah.
So he's in Madison Square Park, which will become Paradise Cove.
This is Cozumel Island, as you can see right here with the pier. You can see all the golf courses and the hotels and so on in the background there, Laurie, and this is going to have a huge effect.
Phil?
Yes?
Excuse me for just a moment.
Uh-huh.
Are you sure you want to get married on this show?
Plus, Jim drops in at one point to give an extensive history of Leap Day, and Rudy Giuliani, then the mayor of New York City, shows up to, no joke, officiate the actual wedding.
So, as we get ready for this ceremony and this important occasion, if there's anyone who objects to their being married, speak now or forever hold your peace. You look nervous.
This is a great idea.
Anybody? Okay. I, as the mayor of the city of New York, by the power invested in me by the state of New York, pronounce you husband and wife. May God bless you and give you a long and happy life. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Go ahead, kiss it.
The whole episode is a genuinely heartwarming and characteristically eccentric way to spiritually send off breakfast time. Watching these episodes, it's easy to get the vibe that everyone is excited. The finale of Breakfast Time just marks the beginning of a short break, and the show would be coming back better than ever before long, ready to share the insanity with the masses. No reason to be sad about the end of Breakfast Time because Fox After Breakfast is right around the corner. But exciting is not exactly how the gang would describe the day of the finale.
Yeah, it was a bittersweet day. I mean, bitter for a lot of us because on the last day of Breakfast Time, I didn't know I was going to go to Fox After Breakfast. They hadn't offered me the job yet. They were still humming and hawing. Tom was auditioning with other co-hosts. Like, they didn't want to take me.
They said, well, we just want to see, right? And I think I stopped it after 2. I just don't want to. This is ridiculous. You know,
He was cheating on me, Connor. Other women. I don't even know who.
Yeah, I don't even remember who, because I just knew it was, it was just a bad idea.
And I don't think even like Jim didn't know, Al didn't know, like very, very few people knew that they were a slam dunk to go to the next level. So we really, after 2 years of like absolute love doing this show, it was such a labor of love and so fun. To say goodbye to it was just surreal because we couldn't believe, the best job ever was being taken away from us.
I think I gave out T-shirts for that last show because I had a saying just before we'd sign on. I'd say, all right, let's kick some cable ass,
Right.
So I had that. I had a bunch of T-shirts made for everybody with that expression on it. But yeah, it was. Well, no, don't burn the Breakfast Time one. But yeah, so it was bittersweet. And I was naively expecting that it was just a matter of crossing T's and dotting I's before all of us would make the transition to the 1-hour network version.
I have to speculate a little bit here, but the leadership at Fox, most likely due to the regime change that had taken place, seemed not to really understand what Breakfast Time was at all. They seemed to like Tom, but everything else about this cast and this format was foreign to these executives. It didn't fit the mold of morning television. Of course, we all know that that's what made it so great, so unique, so innovative, but it's also what made the Fox execs nervous. And worse, it made them actively interested in making drastic changes.
I think, at least initially, there was the hope that there could be regular daytime programming like the other networks had, and we were going to, be the first, we were going to be the canary in the mine shaft for them. I do remember one moment standing with Peter Feynman by the elevator before the show premiered. I think I told you this, Laurie. And he turned to me, he said, "Tom, we can build a dynasty here." And I went, "Oh, shit." I said, "We don't even have one show on the air yet. Let's not get ahead of ourselves."
No, you never told me that.
Oh, yeah. He had such enthusiasm, and I had such a sinking feeling in my stomach because I felt like we were already, it was almost like, have you ever been at a party and the person you're talking to is always looking over your shoulder to see who else just walked in?
Who else is in the room? Yeah.
That's what it felt like to me. Suddenly, somebody that I loved dearly was looking over my shoulder to see what else he could put on.
Fox's approach to morning television was shaping up to be a cautious one, and it was going to model itself after the more traditional morning fare in hopes of winning the respect of existing morning TV viewers, not necessarily in the hopes of winning a new or unique audience. And the thought was that you risk alienating the core morning TV audience if you bombard them with something as unfamiliar as breakfast time. This attitude might explain why it was affirmation from another network morning show that finally got Fox to invite Laurie to make the transition.
It's so funny because Good Morning America offered me a job in the same day that they called and offered me the Fox After Breakfast job. I didn't, because I was hurt that they didn't want me from the beginning. So I was kind of like, should I take it? Should I not? I think I called you, Tom, and you're like, take it. Like, let's just do this. Let's have fun. We did. And the buildup for Fox After Breakfast, remember when we went on that cross-country tour, Tom? Mm-hmm. We felt like superstars. Like our little cable show had like all of a sudden become a hit. We were treated like royalty. We were flown first class. I mean, it was just, the hype was just, we thought this can't go wrong. It's going to be so great.
We were USA Today, remember, on our premiere morning. We were right above.
Yes, I have the picture logo of you showing it. And we're going to kick Regis and Kathy Lee's ass, and we're going to change television. And we came in with a lot of hopes and dreams.
Fox After Breakfast was the subject of great intrigue in the months leading up to its premiere. There was a huge marketing campaign to drum up hype, with the show being billed as a real kick in the AM. For all of the internal concern about how different the show was, the marketing embraced all of the show's innovative qualities. And in industry circles, Fox was projecting total faith in the concept. Jeff D. Rome, a Fox PR guy, pledged that this is a long-term commitment. The network will be extremely patient and expects a slow but steady growth curve while viewers get used to the idea of a new national morning broadcast. There was hype. There was excitement. Fox After Breakfast was going to be big. The only thing left was for it to premiere. The first episode of Fox After Breakfast is one of the only full-length episodes of the show that has survived online. We're going to go through the whole episode together, but first, I want to refresh your memory with a sample intro sequence for an episode of Breakfast Time.
Give me that remote clicker. What is this, Hairstyles of the Rich and Famous? Oh, this must be Whoopi Goldberg's new do. Now, the pattern's a little silly, but I like that green. Welcome to Breakfast Time with Tom Bergeron, Laurie, Hibberd, and Bob the Puppet. My name's Jim, and I'm the announcer. Say good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Tom. Welcome back, Jim.
And here is how day one of Fox After Breakfast gets started.
Good morning. On this special Monday morning, we are looking at the heart of America and the town of Lebanon, Kansas.
Do you notice anything different?
I'm your announcer, Nancy Giles.
That voice belongs to the show's new announcer. Now, no disrespect to Nancy Giles, she's a fine announcer, but Jim the announcer was absolutely integral to the Breakfast Time cast. Of all of the cast members, his humor was the one that really gave the show a peculiar flair. Everything about his presence, from his quips to his laugh to the sound of his actual voice, they were all crucial in making Breakfast Time Breakfast Time. But someone at the network must have disagreed. Jim the announcer is nowhere to be found in Fox After Breakfast. Right from the get-go, the chair is missing one of its legs. Well, that's a bad start, but let's play the intro through. Maybe it gets better.
We welcome viewers in Kansas and all across America to the premiere of Fox After Breakfast.
You're welcome all to come over, and you're invited to stay. It might be just for a moment. Maybe we could ride.
is this working for you guys? It's not really working for me. This music sounds like something you'd hear in a corporate training video or a commercial for allergy medication. And what's going on with all these graphics? License plates, windows, goldfish. I don't get it. What's the connection between all this? These are like computer screensavers. What happened to the chicken? What happened to the bowls of cereal? And for that matter, what happened to the fun fonts and graphics? They're all gone. And this new aesthetic identity just isn't as fun. The episode opens with Tom, who has donned a blazer, giving a general introduction to the new show, trying to familiarize viewers with the live format and the apartment set, and the fact that there is a puppet hanging around.
Here's our puppet, our wart lady Scott.
Where?
Yes. Bob, how are you?
Oh, that would be me.
Yes.
Well, I'm pretty excited, but I got to say, for you, it's a new show. For me, it's just another day behind furniture.
Yeah, I guess you would be right.
Tom heads to the kitchen to introduce Laurie, and we get our first look at the apartment's fresh coat of paint, with colors apparently chosen from the Nickelodeon palette. Nice going, guys. Looks great. No notes. They introduce the Road Warrior segments of the day with Phil Kogan in Lebanon, Kansas, the geographic center point of the continental United States, and Suzanne Wong at a snazzy Los Angeles apartment that used to belong to Ronald Reagan. There's an interview with the X-Files' Gillian Anderson, then some banter with the family at the kitchen table, and then a live phone call to Michael Gelman. You might know Michael Gelman as the youthful executive producer for Live with Regis and Kathy Lee, perhaps the most significant competitor to Fox After Breakfast. And the reason he joins the show on this day is because Michael Gelman and Laurie Hibberd were actually dating at the time. The whole joke of this call was that they wanted to see whether he was watching Regis, which was airing a rerun that day, or watching Laurie.
So how are you dealing with this viewership thing?
Well, you know, I have picture-in-a-picture, so I'm watching both.
Oh, you're on.
Okay. Oh, I'm gonna get you later.
All right.
After that, the next little bit is devoted to the Kansas remote, where Phil talks to the mayor and the owner of a beauty salon, and it isn't exactly making for compelling television.
Can I mention, Phil, they're a very well-behaved town, aren't they?
Yeah. They are. I think, I don't know if they know what's hit them.
The people were just standing there. So I said, can you just get the people on that side to cross to this side and those people to cross? Get some movement going here.
Have them swap sides of the street.
Good idea.
Yeah, just have it.
All right, everyone.
The big street swap in Lebanon, Kansas, ladies and gentlemen.
Sides of the street. This side, please go to this side, and this side, go to this side.
Go Lebanon. Go Lebanon.
Yeah, and literally, they all got up and they crossed the street.
Across the street.
It's the Lebanon, Kansas street swap.
And that was it. That was it.
This is followed by an interview with Cindy Williams of Laverne and Shirley, who brought her family along, which is briefly interrupted by this little backstory video they do about Bob, showcasing his past careers and how he literally fell into the job of morning show co-host. The interview continues, leading to Bill Hudson, Cindy Williams' husband at the time, conducting a sing-along of the Fox After Breakfast theme song, which he actually wrote.
You're welcome to come over, and you're invited to stay. It might be just for a moment. Maybe we can brighten your day.
And then there was this really gag-inducing theme song that they had to start. It was like one bad decision after another.
Then they go to the other remote as Suzanne Wong goes through the Reagan apartment.
And here, this is my favorite part. Yes, there's a bidet in case you want to feel extra special.
Okay, all right. Well, I think we're finding out more than we need to know now, Suzanne.
Then they do a little mailbag segment, and after that, wouldn't you know it, Rudy Giuliani is back in the studio. Everyone in the living room takes turns talking with each other, and the final bit of the show takes place in Kansas as Phil resumes doing his thing.
Another person watching the parade here, Maxine, who's the championship whistler. Thank you very much, Maxine. So we're gonna get.
They watch a little parade that the town was putting on, everyone waves goodbye, and the credits roll on day one of Fox After Breakfast. I think you can look at this premiere through one of two perspectives. From the perspective of the new viewer, I think this would have been a great introduction to this cast and this format. The cameras are handheld, the show is live, everyone's moving around, the hosts are likable, there's a puppet. This is magnificent. But from the perspective of someone who had watched Breakfast Time, this episode feels a little off. It's weird because everything is here, well, almost everything. All the pieces are in place, everything is recognizable. This is just a reskinned Breakfast Time, right? But there's something more subtle that has changed, and I think it stems from the changes in staff, which there were a lot of, including changing the show's director to a man named Dana Calderwood, who came to the show from Late Night with Conan O'Brien. And the change in question is that things move less. This is a change change that actually gets more noticeable as the series progresses. Where Breakfast Time was a show that never stayed still, Fox After Breakfast spends a lot more time in stable scenes where everyone is obediently sitting in their designated little spot.
We didn't have the same director, and Dana Calderwood was a super nice guy.
Yeah.
But you had to be calling 20 cameras. You had to be seeing everything at once. And that Chuck O'Neill really had that gift. And if you didn't have the director catching your moments, then nobody was seeing what was really going on. And I felt like a lot of times we were just trying to make something happen. You'd run around the apartment just because you needed to build energy. Like, I got to get something going here. The whole charm of Breakfast Time was, it really was not a produced show. We, started the show with very good intentions. And by the end of 2 hours, it was very seldom what we had planned in the first place. I'll never forget my favorite line from Paul Shabelson is they had a remote and we didn't have time for this second part of the remote. So he's like, all right, look, kill the orphans. Okay, I don't have time. And I'll never, that is the line of the century. Kill the orphans. We don't have time. But when it got to Fox, it was like, it was too important and there were too many fingers in the pie and too many opinions.
And everything. And they were questioning it was like, I was getting, well, why are you starting in the ballroom? Why are you? Gosh. I was like, well, that's how you did it. Well, no, you should. Why are you walking through the apartment? Why are how come the cameras aren't on tripods? And it was all of a sudden, and again, like the set was different, even though it was the same physical facility, it just felt wrong. Everything just felt wrong.
It never felt comfortable. Yeah.
You know what this looks like to me? This looks like it's being produced like a talk show. If you pay attention to how people are physically situated and how the cameras are arranged, this appears to be mimicking a traditional talk show setup. Hosts go over here, guests go over there. Everyone takes turns talking and, don't move around too much. New viewers might not have been aware, but Breakfast Time was constantly finding something new and interesting to do. No one stood still. Plans for the show were changing before your very eyes. Live TV, at its most entertaining, always kind of feels like it's coming unglued, and Breakfast Time was masterful at capturing the excitement in that atmosphere.
Paul Shabelson was the perfect producer for the show.
Yes.
We went through a couple of others before. I mean, it was Peter Feynman and Peter Howden, and then Jerry
Liddell. Remember Jerry Liddell?
But Paul was the perfect oil for us. Like, he enabled us, but also pumped the brakes. Actually, he never pumped the brakes. His counterpart, Dave Schenfeld.
Oh, yeah,
they were like a married couple that produced the show. Not really, but they acted like it. Dave Schenfeld was always the voice of reason. Tom would say, "Can we get 100,000 peanuts and just drop them from the ceiling?" And Paul would go, "Yes!" And Dave would go, "No." And even if Dave was forced to do it, he would figure out how to do it properly so that it wasn't going to cause, any litigation later on down the road. But also we had, our floor directors, they knew everything that was going on, and they, if they never minded being caught on camera, neither did the cameraman. You have to realize everybody was on the show. Like, everybody listened all the time because you didn't want to miss a minute that could possibly be something you could contribute. The audio guy, Rob Alexander, he was like a radio guy. He had everything on little carts, and if we needed the Josie and the Pussycats thing, boom, he was in there with it within 4 seconds. Do
you remember when Mary Tyler Moore was on and I decided to give her a minute to take as much as she wanted out of the apartment because she was just going on and on? There's never been anything like this. This apartment is amazing. I said, since you're Mary Tyler Moore, I'll give you 60 seconds on the clock. Whatever you can carry, you can keep. And I said, Bob, do you have any music? And instantly, he had the perfect music for the handheld cameraman to follow Mary Tyler Moore around the apartment, taking things off the wall and out of closets.
Yeah, it was really amazing that whatever happened to our show, on our show immediately. Remember the day of the big sinkhole? There was a big sinkhole right in the front of our building at 26th and 5th. Of course, we had to make it part of the show. And Tom came up with the idea to open the Catastrophe Cafe on Fifth Avenue. Right. And we put chairs and tables out. Rob, the audio guy, instantly had Italian cafe music playing behind it. And, we sent Bob down there, and then we had Bob Barker on, and they had all the guys who were trying to fix it.
Hard Hat Price is Right, we called it.
Hard Hat Price is Right. And he went down there and he got the guys. He said, "How much do you think for that payloader?" And we got all the information, and the guy was the closest to, got a prize. And that came up, that was that morning.
That's right.
That wasn't planned for a week. That was nothing. That was that morning. And that's a credit to everybody on board. There wasn't one person going, no, we can't do that. Right. It was everybody's like, yes, let's make this work.
Phil Kogan, I think, was always game for anything. And I expected, the one thing that you didn't have that I expected you might was,
I wondered about that too.
Yeah, was him coming out of the cold
bath.
And he kind of pulled his shorts, just to kind of loosen things up. And unfortunately, the camera was aimed down.
Valerie, that's Russian water, huh?
To which Bob the Puppet goes,
So Phil isn't Jewish. This is what...
It was a great moment. And what was great was the director got all our reactions in time because it was so shocking to all of us to see, you know, Phil's penis on live TV. And just the looks on our faces was like, oh my God. And then, of course, you know, Bob the Puppet comes up with the line of the day.
And then there was a morning that Laurie kept me from being killed by Jimmy Smits and Dennis Frowns. We found out that NYPD Blue was shooting right next to us, right at the end of our little block.
Next door.
And we had a camera mounted on the building across the street, so we had a good angle.
Yeah, we had full coverage everywhere of our,
I
of our
thought,
neighborhood.
how do you welcome cops in the neighborhood? Bring them donuts. So somebody got me a dozen donuts, and I went walking. I didn't even realize they were in the middle of actually shooting a take, surrounding a car. There was some poor actor in there pretending she was a murder victim, you know, trying to go all method. Meanwhile, they have actual New York police there as security, and I breezed right past them, and I'm going, Mr. Franz, would you like some
I got you donuts.
And he
oh my God,
and his wife,
they were so mad.
He and his wife watched FX, so he gave me an eye roll. But Jimmy Smith, who was on the other side of the car, he looked like he wanted to kill me. So I beat a retreat, and we sent Laurie out to make nice.
Like, send Laurie down there.
She'll fix it. And you did.
I did. I got them both to come on, and we did 5 minutes with them talking about the show and what they were shooting. Yeah, it was amazing.
The environment they just described simply did not transition to Fox After Breakfast. Those moments of insanity are almost completely non-existent, and while there are still fun moments and entertaining segments, they're now accompanied by a substantial volume of talk show fluff that's just not as interesting. The irony of all this is that the critics raved about Fox After Breakfast on the grounds that it was so spontaneous, that it was so dynamic.
USA Today says Fox After Breakfast is refreshingly laid back. The New York Post calls it witty and eye-catching, and the Boston Herald hails it as the most entertaining talk show to come along in a video age. Catch Fox After Breakfast, weekday mornings on Fox.
Mwah, to see
How you doing? Nice to see you. I'm so happy about this show being on the net. It's wonderful because a lot of the other shows that you watch, they're kind of structured. You know where it's going to go to the news desk, over here, a couple of commercials, then back over here, then the gossip thing, whatever. But this show, I don't know where it's going, and that helps me get through my hour on the treadmill. Yeah, I know. You don't know either, which makes it wonderful.
As the show continued, it only further descended into traditionalism. One of the more noticeable changes is that while Tom, Laurie, and Bob are all here, it seems like they're never all together at once. Tom does interview X, Laurie does interview Y, and Bob barely does anything at all. And the screen time split is pretty lopsided in favor of whatever Tom happens to be up to. Laurie has become much less of a presence by this point in the show. In any episode, she would maybe have a single segment she would throw to break, and that's about all she's doing here. It's sad too because there is clearly still effort being put in by everyone on camera. Everyone on this show is trying to make it good. It's just that they're being constrained by production decisions beyond their control. Production decisions intended to make the show more predictable and tame and quiet. The antithesis of what Breakfast Time originally stood for.
You know what I remember, Tom, is that our fans didn't like the new show.
No.
The Breakfast Time fans were very vocal about how much they didn't like the new, they missed Jim, they thought an hour wasn't enough, they didn't like the apartment. I mean, they really felt betrayed.
Do you remember Corbin Burnson came on from LA Law, and he had been on the Breakfast Time show. And he, on camera, said, this isn't the same show. You're not having as much fun. And so I said, yeah, you're right. We should do something. So we ended up going into the hallway area, and we put on Laurel and Hardy masks and continued the interview. It was like a desperate attempt to try to feel, but he called us out right on the air, and he was dead right.
And one of the strangest changes was the addition of a game show-esque segment, the Fox After Breakfast Wheel. It was a trivia game played with a caller who was watching the show. They would get the wheel set up, they would give it a spin to determine the prize at stake, they'd ask the question, and that was basically it. I mean, it's inoffensive, but it just feels out of place.
You know what the problem with the wheel was? It wasn't organic to us. If somebody on the Breakfast Time staff or even the Fox After Breakfast had to say, hey, we should do a wheel of, but it came to us from another show. Peter had seen it on another show. And then he kept trying to tell Tom and I what to do while the wheel was spinning.
Yeah,
you know, Tom, look at your watch and walk off. And, you know, you don't care where the wheel's going to end. And Laurie, do your nails or something. It wasn't organic to us. We didn't get it. Yeah. It wasn't our sense of humor. I don't even know what the hell we were giving away. What were we giving?
I barely remember doing it at all because I was so internalized at that point. It just was really not going well. And I remember having one day where I was standing in the apartment. It was like we were on the air, and I was thinking, how can I be in the exact same environment and feel, it's almost like a romantic relationship when there's that inevitable breakfast, you look across the table and go, I feel nothing.
Did I love you? I don't
Did
remember.
I love you? Did I ever love you? I feel nothing now.
Also worth noting is that Fox After Breakfast included a lot of live music. They would have musicians in the studio, names including Styx and the Bee Gees, among many others, as well as on the street outside the building during what they called curbside concerts. This actually did lead to some fun television, like the time they got Chubby Checker on to twist the night away with the gang while Geraldo Rivera is inexplicably hanging around, and the time that the prog rock group Yes reunited on the show.
But I thought it was one of those pranks, you know, oh yeah, John Anderson, Yes wants to reunite here.
No, you sort of kickstart the day for us. After we watch you guys, we got to get out there and do our work. Because you work hard and you put on a great show. So.
Nobody knows the troubles we've seen.
So clearly, it's not all bad, but it was definitely trending in the wrong direction. Ratings were also lackluster, with the show performing worse on average than Fox station's prior 9 a.m. programming, and lagging far behind both Regis and Kathy Lee and the brand new Rosie O'Donnell show. Maybe they could make some changes to the show, you know, loosen the restraints a little bit, lean back into the craziness of breakfast time, get the show back on track. Or maybe they would do something else.
Good morning, I'm Tom Bergeron from Fox After Breakfast. Before we officially begin the show today, I want to take a moment for a personal message from me to you. As you may have read in some of the papers over the weekend and this morning, my friend Laurie Hibberd, who has been my co-host on this show since we debuted just 3 months ago, and prior to that, who had been with me on FX Cable on Breakfast Time, has left the show.
You know, the writing was on the wall for me. I had Peter Feynman call me we were giving an engagement party for our friends, and I had like 30 people at my apartment, and Peter called me, you know, took the call, and he goes, well, we just don't think you have, you don't want to be here anymore, and you have no enthusiasm for the show. And, you know, you're really looking like you don't, you know, you're just not happy. And I said, no, I'm very happy. I'd be happier if you let me do more things, because at that point, the only thing I was doing was throwing to break. They wanted Tom to do every segment, and I would just like do these elaborate throws to break. It was the craziest thing. You know, I said, I'd be happy if you'd let me do more. She's like, well, you know, we're just letting you know that we think you're very unhappy. I'm like,
whether
I'm
you
not.
are or not will determine what your mood is.
And literally 2 days later, I was driving to work with my limo driver that picked me up every morning. And he said, I am so sorry to hear you're leaving the show. And I said, I am? And he said, you're not? And I said, no, I'm not leaving the show. And he goes, oh, it's funny. I was driving 2 Fox executives to the airport the other day, and they said that, you know, you're leaving the show. I was like, I went inside and indeed, like, that all happened in a week. Peter called me. I heard that. I knew I was being fired because I'd been told by Peter Howden that 4 executives wanted to see me in Peter Feynman's office after I got off the air. So I was like, I guess this is my last day. And do you remember, Tom, they made us do the Friday strut at the end of the show instead of the beginning?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They changed the Friday. They changed freaking everything. It was ridiculous. But I remember it was the end of the show, and we were all dancing around, and I knew, and the camera came on me, and it was Mike Moore was the cameraman. And I looked right at the camera and I went, bye-bye. Because I knew that was, right, and if you look for it, you'll see it.
It would be wrong to say that this wasn't somewhat predictable. From the beginning of the new show's development, the Fox execs had shown, at best, only a tepid endorsement of having Laurie on at all. Of course, it wasn't Laurie's fault that the show wasn't working. By this point in the show, she had been reduced to barely being a factor at all, let alone one who could sway the show's success. But it didn't matter. Fox had made their decision, and the chair had lost another leg. So that raises the question, who takes Laurie's place?
They said, oh, we're going to do something like they did on the old Mike Douglas show. Oh, wonderful. And you're going to have a different co-host every week. I said, oh, good. You know.
Of all the ways to handle Laurie's departure, this is no doubt one of the stranger options. Rotating co-hosts. It's just a bizarre concept. You would think that they'd want to cast someone that they really thought would connect with audiences, that people would get to know. But nope, they went with an option that guaranteed that there would never be that sort of iconic duo that thrives on morning television. It would be Tom and whomever wandered into the revolving door that week to join him. Part of what made Tom and Laurie so fun to watch on cable was their chemistry, which was strong from the beginning and got even stronger with time. time. Regular viewers knew how these two operated, knew their dynamic, and it's more fun to watch them do the show when you know how their personalities tend to interact. With rotating co-hosts, there's none of that. These are just two people who don't know each other very well and are suddenly having to fill an hour of television together. If they thought they had a personality lined up that would be definitively better than Laurie, that would be one thing. But this is not that. This is just bewildering. This change accompanied the continuation of the show's trend away from movement and spontaneity and toward a quiet little talk show atmosphere. And do you want to know the reason that this show does not work as a sit-still talk show? Well, a bunch of reasons, but maybe the most important is that there is no studio audience. There's a good reason that every talk show out there has an audience. The audience breathes energy and excitement into these shows, and if you've ever watched a talk show interview with the audience muted, you know that it feels way too quiet, borderline eerie. There's no doubt a psychological element to this that I make no claim to understanding, but bottom line, if you're going to do a talk show, you need to have an audience to make it work. Now, to be clear, I think it would be more than a bit of a stretch to call Breakfast Time a talk show, given just how much was going on in that environment. And it had no need for an audience thanks to the energy coming from its production and its freewheeling spirit. But in getting rid of those elements and transitioning into the talk show mold, the energy that was lost goes unreplaced. And the result is a humdrum hour of drowsy, forgettable conversations. And it's not like the ratings were encouraging after these changes either. In fact, rather predictably, the show started losing ground following Laurie's departure. But hey, never fear. The executives are here with the solution. And after everything we've seen so far, what they decided to do next will probably not surprise you.
They let Laurie go, and then they tell me, all right, this puppet thing's not working either. So then I found out there was a DNA test I had for a show called Who Do You Think You Are? I'm 44% Irish. 80% of that is temper. And I was already drinking more than I've ever imbibed in my life, because there was that bar that was right next door, Dewey's Flatiron, right next door. I was the first one in there drinking martinis to just...
At 11 in the morning.
Yeah, whenever I could, it's just, let me in, this damn show's killing me. And so then they tell me we got to get rid of the puppet. Okay, fine. So like we had David Frost, Sir David Frost, and I said to him, would you do a David Frost interview with Bob? Because they're firing the puppet. And he did.
I arrived at the studio this morning. People came up to me waving signs saying, SOB, SOB. They were supporters of Bob's.
That was one of those little glimmers of something that would have lived on Breakfast Time. David Frost did this very serious interview with Bob, and he's going, are you getting any support from the puppet community? And Al's going,
I mean, people I had hoped to hear from, I haven't heard from.
You mean that the puppets themselves are not giving you the support that you deserve?
Well, exactly. That's exactly what I mean. The ones that are working really don't care, and the ones that aren't are sending in resumes.
Yeah. What would you do if you are deemed extinct on this show?
I don't have much of a choice, David. I could become a throw rug, an oven mitt, a catcher's glove for the Mets.
This is
a throw pillow.
Oh no! Oh, this is tragic stuff. Well,
I'm sorry. Turn the cameras off.
Well, thank you for showing us all what you're made of. What are you made of, actually?
100% acetate, 3% cotton.
Thank you very much indeed.
And then Peter got fired the day after I was being pressured to, you got to get rid of the puppet. I mean, let's at least this time make it organic to the show. You know, Bob's been here and suddenly he's not going to be here. And how about we come up with some rationale why he's not going to be on the show? As long as it's done. So the rationale we came up with was that Bob got promoted to be the network executive overseeing Fox After Breakfast. And we had him on a remote with a little tie and a suit jacket and all this. I probably said after we did the satellite interview with Bob, well, there's the Peter principle in practice. Right now, the Peter principle is fairly commonly known as a principle that somebody is promoted above their level of expertise.
Right. It's like failing
unless you have the ego of a network executive, Peter Chernin, for example, and he's watching it in LA and thinks that I'm talking about him. So Peter Chernin, Rick Jacobson are sitting in LA watching the satellite feed of me saying Bob has been Peter principle to the executive suite. And all hell breaks loose. And Feynman gets fired that day. And I find out that Chernin thought I said, you've never heard of the fucking Peter principle? Jesus.
So now the chair has lost its third leg, and it's also lost its original creator and visionary. Now, by the time he had left, Bob had been relegated to background character status anyway, hardly ever getting a word in during most of the show's segments. His departure meant that Tom was the only figure remaining from Breakfast Time, which is probably what Fox actually wanted in the first place anyway. On the other hand, while Peter Feynman might have been the one to dream up Breakfast Time way back in 1993, a lot had changed between then and now.
I think Peter would admit now that he was not the same Peter Feynman that he was in terms of his creative approach, was not the same guy who launched FX. I mean, the Peter Feynman of FX would never have said to us, okay, now look at your watch, walk off, pretend you're bored. You never would have said anything like that. He would say, go for it, just whatever, you know. I think all of us, I'd have to say me too in this regard. I didn't fight hard enough when my gut was going, but I sort of acceded to Peter because he was the guy who got me out of Boston and who, you know, gave me an incredible sandbox to play in and an incredible group of people to partner with. Based on that experience, I felt, well, he knows what he's doing. And he was probably dealing with the new Fox executive too. It was like having so much freedom and then suddenly you look down and you've got an ankle weight on you.
Wonderful honor and experience.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Peter Feynman is our executive producer, has decided to start yelling things at me in the middle of what I think is a very good interview, Peter. So hand him a microphone, Terry, and share it with the country, Peter.
Tom, we have a very, very good clip to show.
Oh,
and we think you should do it now.
Oh, you think so? Sure.
It would help the audience to understand the show a little more.
Excuse me, did you put him up to this?
No, I don't even know that man. In fact, I thought he came with you.
Oh, yeah, well,
you know, Tom, here's a chance to be a man.
I think
Don't show
it's wise to see the clip.
All right.
Excuse me, Bob.
We're going to take a look at a clip from Party of Five.
Cool.
Where's Griffin?
And it just wasn't as fun at all to beat a dead horse.
Have we made that clear enough yet?
Yeah, we didn't like it.
And there really isn't much more to say about the remainder of Fox After Breakfast's run that I haven't already said. It would just be rephrasing the same core idea over and over. It moved slow, it lacked energy, and it wasn't very interesting. The damage had been done for Fox After Breakfast. This show was not going to have some sort of miraculous turnaround. Given the show's rating situation, the rest of the show's run was probably just garbage time anyway, running out the clock until it was okay to pull the plug.
Again, there were the occasional glimmers, but they got fewer and further between, and the bar became my favorite place to go. The actual show is a way station on my journey to the bar in those last
It was a whistle stop in your morning.
That's exactly right. I was being courted by Good Morning America. I had Roone Arledge saying, you know, we'd like to talk to you about being the guy who replaces Charlie Gibson when Charlie leaves, which I think he'd indicated he wanted to. And I remember saying, you know what, I just want to go through, they promised me February sweeps, they're going to promote the show and all this stuff. And I said to my agent at the time, let's just get, and of course they didn't. And I dove into a massive glass of orange juice as a final FU to the executives at the network. And I remember Jim Kokot was watching and he texted me after. He says, when I saw you jump in that orange juice, I knew that you had the spirit of the show back. I said, yeah, Jim, that's me going, I'm out of here. Finally, I said to Paul Shavelson, I said, I've had it. I'm not happy. I'm drinking like crazy. This isn't the show that we thought it was going to be. I've got vacation time coming. And Paul said, just so you know, if you cash in your vacation time, they're not going to want you back. I said, well, that's the first thing we've agreed on in a while. And that's when I cashed in all my vacation time and said, hello, Mr. Arledge, I'm ready.
Tom hosted Fox After Breakfast for the entire first half of 1997, with June 19th being his final day on the show. It entered reruns not too long after that. And this would spell the end of Fox After Breakfast. It was an underperforming show that had presented nothing but problems, and now it had lost its main personality. Surely, it was time to turn out the lights. But actually, no. Fox curiously decided to renew the show for another season. They just decided to completely overhaul it, completing its transition to a talk show format, and then slotting in Vicki Lawrence to host it and giving it an entirely new identity. Fox After Breakfast became The Vicki Lawrence Show. Vicki was a known quantity in the world of daytime talk, having hosted a syndicated talk show called Vicki! For 2 seasons beginning in 1992, and it was a successful venture that netted Vicki a handful of Emmy nods. It actually ended not because it was underperforming, but because there were some internal power struggles that proved unresolvable. But just 3 short years later, Fox had a show without a host, and if Fox wanted a predictable talk show, it's not surprising that they went for a host with a proven track record. Vicki was initially skeptical of the invitation, but Fox won her over with their pleads for Vicki to save the franchise of Fox After Breakfast. Vicki, recognizing the clout she would have as the network's savior, came aboard the project and agreed to move her family across the country to do the show. The show itself was still based out of the Fifth Avenue apartment, but you'll notice that things have changed. Now the cameras are all mounted on pedestals. No more of this handheld business. They've also structured everything like a traditional talk show. No more road warriors, no more standing and walking around the apartment. In fact, it's almost as if the rest of the apartment isn't even here at all. Everyone just spends their time in the main couch space, which they actually moved into the area formerly occupied by the kitchen table, a change intended to make way for the slapdash studio audience that they've inserted in the former living room. There's only one episode of the Vicki Lawrence Show that I was able to find online, and it's a pretty low-quality handheld recording. There's not much interesting to say about it. Vicki is a fine talk show host, I guess, but this format has nothing in common with Fox After Breakfast at all, and this episode honestly didn't hold my attention. And the reason this show is so obscure stems from the fact that it had an incredibly short run. Just out of curiosity, when I say a show had a short run, how long are you thinking? 6 months? Maybe 3? Maybe even as low as 2? The Vicki Lawrence Show lasted 1 month. It debuted on August 19th, 1997, and was canceled just over a month later on September 22nd, for a grand total of 25 episodes before Fox abruptly pulled the plug and left their stations with 2 weeks to find some other show to fill the vacated time. And with that, the story of Breakfast Time comes to an unceremonious end. 20 months of groundbreaking cable glory, 12 months of middling network mediocrity, and 1 month of Vicki Lawrence. It's obviously a shame that Breakfast Time would suffer this fate, not only meeting its demise, but meeting it in such a heartbreaking way. To go from being filled with promise and hope for what a network adaptation of Breakfast Time would look like, to having it changed and adjusted constantly in order to meet some nebulous network vision for the correct type of morning show, until it didn't even bear a passing resemblance to the show it was based on. Breakfast Time deserves to be remembered. There has never been anything like it on American television. Nothing I can think of that even so much as attempted to capture the magic and insanity of the live dynamic environment quite like Breakfast Time did. And yet, outside of a small pocket of devoted FX viewers, it seems like no one remembers Breakfast Time. It doesn't even have its own Wikipedia page. We're talking that level of obscurity. And that's unfortunate. If you take anything away from these videos, let it be the memory of what Breakfast Time was at its best. It deserves to have a legacy of its own, distinct from that of its ill-fated successor. In the aftermath of Breakfast Time, FX dropped its live TV brand and switched almost entirely to airing syndicated reruns. And they transitioned their branding away from this friendly look and into this bold identity. The F is capitalized now. Personal FX was the final original FX show to get canceled in 1998. FX struggled to find its identity for a little while, but eventually they leaned into edgy original shows that would come to be some of the most venerated names in cable TV, including It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, Sons of Anarchy, Archer, The Americans, Atlanta, American Horror Story, and the list goes on. 212 Fifth Avenue, the building that housed the FX apartment, has today been converted primarily into condos, and among its residents is Jeff Bezos, who has spent over $100 million to buy up the top 5 stories of the building. Now, I can't possibly highlight the career of every Breakfast Time personality, but I would be remiss if I failed to mention that Phil Kogan would go on to host The Amazing Race beginning in 2001. Laurie, who ultimately married Michael Gelman and took his last name, had a brief stint with Good Morning America before continuing her career on CBS's Early Show.
The Early Show on CBS, when Brian Gumbel was hosting it with Jane Clayson. Did not do well, but I was there for 5 years. It was fun. I was the pop culture correspondent. I got married in that time and had my children. It was a great way to have a little bit of work time and then a lot of home time. As I said, I got very obsessed with doing things about kids. So when I asked my producer if I could be the baby correspondent or the parenting correspondent or whatever, they said no, because those are usually people who've written books about and I said, but I'm living it. I'm in it. I'm in the trenches daily. Please let me do something about it. And they were like, no, No, you can't. So I ended up leaving, and then I got a job in Canada hosting something called The Mom Show, which was exactly what I wanted to do. That was unscripted. That was lots of stuff going on a much smaller scale than Breakfast Time. But this time I was the Tom, and I had this person that I was sort of bringing along, Catherine Marion, who became a fantastic co-host.
Today, Laurie is perhaps best known as a successful author. She has written 4 books in an acclaimed series of humorous novels called Class Mom. As for Tom, he also joined Good Morning America immediately following his departure from Fox After Breakfast.
The GMA thing I did for, I think, 8 or 9 months. I got signed because Elizabeth Vargas and I had done a test week, and it went exceedingly well. She was so welcoming, and unfortunately, she wasn't the one that they had hired to replace Joan London. There was somebody named Lisa McCree. The lack of chemistry between the two of us was so strong that if you sat close to your television, you actually felt a wind chill come off the screen. So that wasn't going to work because she was hired as a full-time person, and they had to, I think, a target date, they had to announce whether or not I was the guy. It didn't play out, but they had to cut me a nice check. So we got a house in New Hampshire that I call McCree Manor. I actually had a little plaque made, and it says McCree Manor, established summer 1999, from cold shoulder to warm hearth.
I'd been on Good Morning America by the time Tom came. And I'll never forget, there was one morning where only like 10 people in the world would think this was great, but it was Tom and I were on Good Morning America. He is the host and me as one of the reporters. And I remember we sat down at the table. Do you remember the first thing I said to you?
I don't. What was it?
I sat down and I went, quit following me.
Oh, right. Yeah. And it was weird, too. I remember feeling just how strange it was that the two of us were sitting there on this morning show with teleprompters and, the complete antithesis of everything we had done on Breakfast Time. We were the counterpoint to a GMA, and now there we were.
Neither one of us was happy to be there, though. It was yeah.
It was a gig.
After GMA, he came aboard a developing revival of Hollywood Squares, a revival for which Whoopi Goldberg was sitting in the center square. Conveniently, Whoopi had actually been a guest on one of the more lively episodes of Fox After Breakfast, and the friendship that formed between her and Tom would ultimately make for a compelling pilot that landed Tom the hosting gig on the show. And from there, as you probably already know, Tom would go on to host America's Funniest Home Videos for 14 years beginning in 2001, and then Dancing with the Stars for 15 years beginning in 2005.
And again, the cable version to this day, the most fun I've ever had on television. Even though other things I've done have reached far wider audiences, in terms of how I felt going to work every day, nothing has ever compared to Breakfast Time.
Agreed. It spoiled me for any other television. And I did a lot after that, but it was never that show. It's weird when you get fired because it's just, you're done. Like you leave on Friday and I didn't even get a chance to clean out my office. Do you know what I mean? Like I was just done and I never saw anybody again unless I made the effort to go out with them, and it was awkward and, sad and all that. So yeah, when it died a slow death, and not slow enough, according to Tom, by the time Vicki Lawrence took over, I was feeling pretty good about myself.
I've had a modern day sort of parallel. There was another show that I got fired from, and now it's not on the network anymore. And I know exactly how you feel, Laurie.
When I saw that, I typed you. I'm like,
yeah.
The Breakfast Time cast has remained in touch since the show's end, periodically reuniting to relive memories of what they all seem to agree has been a highlight of their careers. Numerous individuals associated with Breakfast Time got a hold of my first video and left very nice comments, all of them echoing the sentiment that Breakfast Time was an incredible show to be a part of. And as for Bob the Puppet, he's actually still around.
I've got one at our house in
Al's got the other one.
Al's got the other one.
Al's got one.
Visitors to the house, or especially if they're kids, are not allowed to touch Bob the Puppet.
Wait, do you have the original or do you have the stunt Bob?
I think I have stunt Bob. I have stunt Bob. Yeah.
Stunt Bob got thrown out windows. It was bad. Like he'd have things glued on him.
Yeah, I know. One of his eyes is even sagging a little more than it used to.
Yeah.
And I think that brings us into the present day and to the end of this video. I want to thank all of you for watching, and I want to especially thank the Breakfast Time community who have offered tremendous words of support ever since I released part 1 of this project. And of course, my deepest thanks to Tom Bergeron and Laurie Gelman for their willingness to support my humble little YouTube channel and offer their perspectives for this video. Never did I think that either of them would even see that video, let alone be a part of the follow-up. Interviewing them was a great experience, and I think it made for a great documentary. All right, I'm done talking. I'll see you all in the next deep dive I take on, but until that time comes, goodbye.